Hey everybody, it's May, and today I need to do my day 15 Bible reading and the one story that leads to Jesus. So just stay tuned. Alrighty guys, so I released the study guide last night. I hope you guys got to see that video, and let me go ahead and zoom out a little bit. Okay, so last night in the video I was saying that, it wasn't set up for punching it in the margins. I personally want to use page protectors, but once I posted that video last night, I thought about it when I went to bed, and I was like, that don't work for me. I don't like something that ain't right. So I went back this morning and I gave a very generous, it's over a ½ inch. You got a very generous margin, and when you turn your pages, it would still have the same margin over here. So you'll have a nice generous margin on either side, so that when you print and punch and you've got it double-sided, you're not going to punch into anything on this side, and you're not going to punch into anything on that side. So I updated the download for the printable version of it, and I updated the listings for the physical Bible study guides, where you could say unpunched big happy planner or 3-ring binder. So I just wanted to let you know that last night in the video I said it wasn't really set up, and I was showing you like how it was before, where it was punching into some of the words. It's not like that anymore. It's working where you can literally punch it and stick it into anything you like. And the Happy Planner punch I use is not the Happy Planner big Happy Planner punch. I use a Levenger. It's a larger mushroom, and I think it turns on the discs much better. So yeah, anyway, really sorry about that, guys. You gotta love living in the post-Helene area. The city constantly calls and lets you know things, and today was like an extension on coming and getting debris, like where tree limbs had fallen and they come and cut them. Yeah, it's just like a lot of stuff. So anyway, when we had left off, we were in chapter 45, and we know that, Joseph tells his brothers who he is, and he not only tells them that he forgives them, but that it was part of God's plan for him to be in Egypt, for him to find favor with Pharaoh, to be able to interpret dreams with his God-given gift, to be in the position that he's in to help his family during the famine, because it's not temporary. Other than the Pharaoh and those who Joseph has let know, or the Pharaoh know, no one knows it's going to last 7 years. So his brothers are constantly, going to go get grain, and they don't realize that this is going to be going on for another 5 years. And so Joseph clues them into that. And we found out that when the Pharaoh found out that Joseph's brothers were there and he'd been reunited with them, he wanted them to come to Egypt. He's like, do what you have to do, get your family here. The Pharaoh is blessing that. So we're going to go ahead and start with chapter 46. And it says Joseph brings his family to Egypt. So it says, the notes that I was taking was basically Jacob is an old man, okay? He's 130 years at this point. And we know that God has renamed him Israel. And we know that Joseph is his absolute favorite son. He has been distraught for years because he thought that by sending him to go check on his brothers, that he'd been torn apart by wild animals. And basically the man's been racked with guilt, thinking it was his actions that led to Joseph's death, when that's not true at all. And so he's a little hesitant, as most older people would be, to make this trip, but yet he wants to see his child. So it says, so Israel took his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here I am. And then he said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make you into a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again. And Joseph's hands shall close your eyes. So just this one little passage here, verses 1 through 4, we find out a lot here. We know that he started the journey, but he also knows that he has a covenant with God, that God is going to make a great nation of him. So it makes you wonder, did Jacob think that he was doing the wrong thing to go to Egypt? Is this part of God's plan? And with God coming to him nightly in dreams, letting him know, I'm still going to make you a great nation. I'm going to be there with you. I'm going to go with you. And you're going to be with your son Joseph. Everything that you've wanted. And the day you die, Joseph will be by your side, and he's going to be the one that closes your eyes. So it's a beautiful sentiment right here. But there's also some serious foreshadowing here. We already know what's going to happen. They're going to be enslaved for 400 years, This is the happy time, like when they get to Egypt. And somehow along the lines, they're going to become so great, so multiplied, that they become a burden to the pharaohs of Egypt. And they become enslaved. And he says to Jacob, and I will also bring you up again. So we don't know how Jacob interpreted that part of what God said to him, but we know with the foreshadowing and with what happens in the book of Exodus, that it is God that will deliver his people. So I put chapter 46 chronicles Israel's migration to Egypt, driven by a devastating famine in Canaan, and his emotional reunion with his long-lost son Joseph. And it says, he takes everyone with him. I mean, just like everyone. And it goes into great detail of how the offspring has happened. It says, encouraged by the divine vision, Jacob gathers his entire family and all of his belongings and sets out for Egypt. He stops at Beersheba to offer sacrifices and receives renewed assurances from God. God will be with Jacob in Egypt and renews his promise to make him a great nation. Joseph will be there when he dies. It also says, and I will bring you up again. Well, sorry, friends. It's really a nice weekend. It's a beautiful Saturday morning, and the motorcycles are out now. So anyway, as we continue into verse 4 all the way through verse 25, it's listing in great detail all of the descendants. And it says this chapter meticulously lists Jacob's descendants, including their wives and children. Examples of God's promise and Joseph's wealth and power to have the ability to support so many. So what we have to realize is God is keeping his covenant from Abraham all the way through Jacob, that he's going to make them into a great nation. And so by listing out all of these people, including the wives and children, we see just how much God has been keeping his covenant and promise with this family that started with Abraham. Not only that, we know that Joseph and the Pharaoh has already said, come to Egypt. And Joseph has told his brothers, tell my father I will take care of everyone. Because we know that Joseph is vastly wealthy with everything he's had bestowed on him by the Pharaoh. And because of his faithfulness with God and his character, he's been blessed. And all of these people are what he is going to be responsible for during the famine. So it shows you in, a broader aspect of just how much power and wealth that Joseph has acquired to be able to support so many people. Okay, so Jacob and Joseph reunited. So it goes into this beautiful passage right here where Israel says to Joseph, now let me die since I have seen your face and know that you are still alive. Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, I will go up and tell Pharaoh, and I will say to him, my brothers and my father's household who were in the land of Canaan have come to me, and the men are shepherds, for they have been keepers of livestock, and they have brought their flocks and their herds and all they have. When Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? You shall say, your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth even until now, both we and our fathers, in order that you may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination to Pharaoh, to Egyptians. So he's reunited with his father. He's very happy. But here's a little bit backstory that most people may not realize. Goshen at the time was the best land in Egypt. And it's kind of unusual for, Pharaoh or any of the Egyptians to just give Hebrews the best land. But they have like this, not that they're racist, but they're just really against shepherds. They consider them dirty. It's an occupation they don't find worthwhile. That's the lower classes. And so by saying that they have brought all their livestock and all their herds, and this is all they've ever done has been shepherds, when he goes before Pharaoh and says this, the ideal place to put them at the time is in Goshen, which is actually the best land, but it's fertile enough for the livestock and the herds, especially during this time of famine. So if you're taking care of the livestock and the herds, there's a possibility that there'll be protein, there'll be meat for the people of Egypt. So it's going to be a very good compromise for Pharaoh. So it says, upon his arrival, Jacob is met by Joseph, and their tearful reunion marks a turning point in their relationship. Joseph then presents his family to Pharaoh, strategically introducing them as shepherds, a profession generally disliked by Egyptians, so that they could stay in Goshen and not be troubled. Goshen was the best land. So he takes 5 of his brothers and his father before Pharaoh. Okay, and Jacob ends up blessing the Pharaoh while he's in his presence. It says, Joseph presents his brothers and father to Pharaoh. Jacob blesses Pharaoh, and at this time, Jacob is 130 years old. Joseph provides his family with food from his own storehouses. Okay, so when he tells them, and they said to Pharaoh, your servants are shepherds as our fathers were. They said to Pharaoh, we have come to sojourn in the land, for there is no pasture for our servants' flocks, for the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. And now, please let your servants dwell in the land of Goshen. And then Pharaoh said to Joseph, your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best of the land. Let them settle in the land of Goshen. And if you know any able men among them, put them in charge of my livestock. So he wants his livestock taken care of. He doesn't mind that it goes to Joseph and his family down in Goshen. So then Joseph brought in Jacob his father and stood him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Jacob, how many are the days of the years of your life? And Jacob said to Pharaoh, the days of the years of my sojourning are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of my years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their sojourning. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from the presence of Pharaoh. And then basically, it says Pharaoh had then Joseph settled his father and brothers and gave them possessions in the land of Egypt and the best land in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph provided his father, his brothers, and all the father's household with food according to the number of their dependents. This is a little bit of where some people get into a little bit of controversy, and they're trying to say that when he said in the best land, in the land of Ramses, that this Pharaoh was Ramses. I've looked into a lot of commentary, and I have never heard it stated that he was Ramses. However, I have heard in a lot of commentary and read it, in Exodus, they're trying to say that the Pharaoh with the hardened heart that will not let the people go is Ramses II. But, again, that's not definitive, okay? So now we have Joseph and the famine. And this goes into great detail of how strategic Joseph was when dealing with the people of Egypt in order to feed them, but he also seriously profits for the Pharaoh at the same time. It says there was no food in all the land, for the famine was very severe, so that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished by reason of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan in exchange for the grain that they had bought. Now Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. And when the money was all spent in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, give us food. Why should we die before your eyes, for our money is gone? And Joseph answered, give me your livestock, and I will give you food in exchange for your livestock, if your money is gone. So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them food in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the herds, and the donkeys. He supplied them with food in exchange for all their livestock that year. And when that year ended, they came to him the following year and said, we will not hide from my lord that our money is all spent. The herds of livestock are the Lord's. There is nothing left in the sight of the Lord but our bodies and land. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for food, and we with our land will be servants to Pharaoh, and give us seed that we may live and not die, and that the land may not be desolate. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for all the Egyptians sold their fields because the famine was severe on them. The land became Pharaoh's. So he not only gets all the money out of everyone in Egypt and Canaan, and of course it's going to Pharaoh. He gets all the livestock of any kind, and we know his brothers and his family in Goshen is going to tend to these flocks as well as Pharaoh's, and that's going to help support and be able to feed these people. They run out of all that. Now they're coming back and they're like, we sell ourselves and we sell our land, but give us some seed so that we can take care of the ground and we can try to grow something so that we don't die. And he does exactly that. He gives them food in exchange for, basically you could say, indentured servitude as well as their land. And it says, as for the people, he made servants of them from one end of Egypt to the other. Only the land of the priest he did not buy, for the priest had a fixed allowance from Pharaoh and lived on the allowance that Pharaoh gave them. Therefore, they did not sell their land. If anyone is into Egyptian history, ancient cultures and civilizations, you will know that for the Egyptians, their priests with all of these hundreds of gods, a lot of people think it's just a few, it's hundreds of gods. The Egyptians found a reason to have a god for everything. Their priests are vital to them. They believe they hold all the magic. They believe that they're the gateway between their gods. And they believe that the Pharaoh is the god on earth. Of course, it makes sense that the Pharaoh literally took care of the priests. You know, he's taking care of Joseph. He's taking care of Joseph's family. He showed favor to them. So why would we not believe that he showed favor to all of his priests in Egypt, which were many, many priests? It says, then Joseph said to the people, behold, I have this day bought you and your land for Pharaoh. Now here is seed for you, and you shall sow the land. And at the harvest you shall give a fifth to Pharaoh, and four-fifths shall be your own, as seed for the field, and as food for yourselves and in your households, and as food for your little ones. So he's not taking everything away from them. They've sold their land. They've sold themselves as servants. He says, look, take this seed, see what you can grow, especially during famine, because we know there's not going to be abundant harvest. It didn't say there wasn't going to be any, but there just won't be abundant. So he's like, whatever you are able to harvest from what you sow from the seed, only a fifth, 20% goes to Pharaoh. You can keep 80%. And between that 80% that you keep, make sure you get enough seed out of it, because they need to plant again, and feed yourselves and your little ones. So he's not being heartless, okay? But he is increasing the wealth greatly for Pharaoh. And so it ends this chapter here, says, and when the time drew near that Israel must die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, if now I have found favor in your sight, put your hand under my thigh. And we remember from previously in the book of Genesis, between, I believe it was Melchizedek. What was the guy's name? It was the man who went to go find Isaac a wife. And when Abraham sent him, it was a solemn promise. It's like a solemn oath between them. What is that guy's name? I'm sorry, guys. I just have to know. I'm sorry. His name was Eliezer. So we know that Eliezer, when he went to go get Isaac's wife, who was Rebecca. Was it Rebecca? It was Rebecca. Okay, so his name was Eliezer. So we know that that's a solemn oath. He said, put your hand under my thigh and promise to deal kindly and truly with me. Do not bury me in Egypt and let me die, but let me lie with my fathers. Carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burying place, which we know is the cave of Machpelah. He answered, I will do as you have said. And he said, swear to me. And he swore to him. And then Israel bowed himself upon the head of his bed. So he just kind of like flumped over, like, whew, seriously relieved. Okay, so the notes I put over here, did I read this side yet? Is the famine was very severe, and it wasn't long before the people of Egypt and Canaan had given all their money to Joseph. When they ran out of money, Joseph told them he would accept livestock as payment for food. When they ran out of livestock, they went to Joseph and asked him again for food. Joseph told them he would sell them food in exchange for their land and their service to Pharaoh. They agreed, and he bought all the land for Pharaoh. Jacob gave them seed to grow crops, but required 1/5 of their harvest to be given to Pharaoh. When Jacob sensed the time was approaching that he would die, he sent for Joseph and made him swear an oath to return his body to the cave of Machpelah to bury him. Jacob lived 147 years, 17 years of which were in Egypt. So we know that Joseph is doing his duty and taking care of Pharaoh, and he's also taking care of his family. And his dad calls him and goes, "Look, I'm going to die soon, but I don't want to be buried here. This is not my land. I want to be buried in the cave of the patriarchs. I'm upset that, my wife died on the way, your mother, and she was buried, in Bethlehem, but I need to be buried in this cave. Promise me, swear to me." And he does. Joseph says, "Don't worry, I will make sure that you are buried there." So, I'm trying to see, are we still reading any further? No, that was the end of today's reading. So, we know that he not only, has reunited with his father, he has Pharaoh's blessing, he's making Pharaoh greatly wealthy, he's taking care of his father. His father's going to pass, and he knows there is going to come a journey when dad dies. I got to take him back to Canaan and bury him in the cave of Machpelah. And so that's where we end today's reading. Sorry with all the distractions, you guys, but hopefully the next video won't be so distracted. And until I see you for another one, y'all have a great day. Bye.